is Edwin Krawitz, class of '55. I started in '50, but when the Korean War broke out, so was on active duty, and as a result, I had to drop from the class of '52. Came back in time to graduate in '55. As a matter of fact, it was during the Korean War, but I drew a lucky card, and together with a bunch of other company grade officers, we were transferred to Germany, where there were no bullets flying around. And so here I had, as a second lieutenant, dinner at the Officers Club, steak for 75 cents, Beck's beer for 6 cents a bottle, and candlelight orchestral music at dinner time, while my poor comrades were on the other side of the world getting shot up. Well, one of the things, leaving Germany for a minute, or before leaving Germany for a minute, I lucked out as a company grade officer of getting assigned to courts martial and representing defendants, which was a good bit of experience for law school when I returned. So that was a tie-in with the service and some legal experience. For professors, of course, I would get mixed up as to the year, but one of the little things that I do remember, if we're taking them as they come into my mind, is I had Ray Bradley for civil procedure, and he was a tough guy. He talked like a Philadelphia hood, but he was a great prof. And I remember him one day calling on a lady, I think her name was Henrietta Harris, and she responded that she was not prepared to answer his question. So he said, "I'll bet you read the Lady's Home Companion." And so he gave her a rough time, but he was a good prop. And I had Clark Bice for contracts, who was a great prop. And unfortunately, I had him in time before he left for Harvard. And he eventually taught at Harvard. But he was a great prop. They were rough on the few ladies we had in our class. The props were a little rough on them. Because nowadays, I don't know how many ladies are in the law school class, but I'd venture to say 50% or more. And then we had 1%, if that. It was a man's world. After my time at Penn, I clerked for a while, and then my wife and I decided to open my own office in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. And it was not usual to be able to open your own office without a previous connection with another lawyer, so you could at least keep the wolf away from the door. So we tried it, and it worked, and I had a few little experiences. The Republicans were in the midst of selecting their candidates for district attorney, and they didn't have anybody who would take it. And so the judge, then Fred Davis, and the Republican county chairman came to me, and they said, "Eddie, we need somebody to fill the ticket. Would you run for DA?" It'll help your law practice. So of course I consented to do it. And I recall I ran against a man by the name of James Marsh. And at the same time, I was chairman of the cancer drive in Monroe County, and I had a lady who was going to conduct a ceramic auction. So we were in our first couple of years of law practice, didn't have very much money. To say we were poor, well, with an education, we weren't poor. But the time came for an evening auction of those ceramics, and I had no way. I had to go over early to get things set up with the auctioneer, and so we had no way of getting over to the auction. So I called my opponent up, and I said, or he called me up. He said, "Hey, what time is your auction over there? Because I want to go over and electioneer." And so I said, "Jim, it's at 7:30, but would you mind picking up Bobby, my wife, and Steve, my son, who sits here now with us, and picking them up and bring them over?" So he said, "Not at all." So he did that at the event. He picked up my wife, and Steve brought them over to the auction. Everything went well. And I get home that night after the auction is over, walk into the bedroom, and there on my pillow was a card, vote James R. Marsh, District Attorney. So we had a great laugh over that, because it was a friendly campaign. And we knew who was going to win and who was going to lose, so we had nothing to hold back on. But it was a nice little, had a good laugh over that. We were in those days told, 3 look on each side of you, one of you is not going to be here next year. That could have been the one thing that shook me up. And I attribute to the fact that I was called to active duty in the middle of my first year of law school, that is 50 to 51, by a blessing in disguise, because I really feel to this day that had I continued law school when I started in 50, I would have flunked out and never became a lawyer. But as it was, I was discharged in 52 and returned to law school, and I attributed somewhat of a little maturity that one gains a little bit after he's gone from the environs. So we eventually became a lawyer. In those days in Monroe County, we didn't have public defenders the way that an indigent defendant would be represented would be. If he did not have counsel, the judge would appoint somebody, and willy-nilly, and I was sitting in the courtroom one day, and Judge Davis looked down upon me, and he said, "Mr. Krawitz, how would you like to represent James Warner here? He's charged with larceny of an automobile." So I said, "I'll be happy to, Your Honor," with a smile on my face, because you didn't cross a judge if he asked you to serve the court. So I went over to the DA's can with his complaints, and I read the information against Warner, and it looked pretty much like he was solidly guilty, and so I tried to persuade him to plead guilty. And I said, "Jimmy, you know, these facts look very dead against you, and if you're found guilty by a jury, the judge is going to send you away for a long time." He said, "No, I'm not guilty. I didn't do it. I want a trial." Well, we had no choice, so he had a 2-day trial, and lo and behold, the Lord graced upon him, and so he was found not guilty. He didn't even thank me for representing him. Some months later, my wife and I decided to go to the movie on a Sunday night with another couple, the other couple driving their car. Having grown up in a small town of Hawley, Pennsylvania, we never locked our house or locked our keys, took the keys out of the car. Or when we left it, we just walk away from the car with the keys in the car. Came back from pizza, no car where I thought I parked it. I called the Stroudsburg police and reported the stolen car. And they said, well, we'll call the East Stroudsburg police and have them give a lookout, and we'll check the Interborough Bridge, check that, and we'll just let you know what happens. A couple hours later, the phone rings in my apartment, and the policeman said, Ed, this is so-and-so. I just got a call from the East Stroudsburg police. They found your car, and I'll pick you up, and we'll go over and get your car. I said, great. As a matter of fact, we didn't have much money in those days, and this was a 1950 car, Plymouth, that was not worth $50. It just could move. Anyway, walk into the police station, and who was in the police station looking very sheepishly, but James Warner. Well, I started to laugh like hell, and the policeman said, Ed, you're going to represent him this time? You're going to represent him this time? And that was a very funny moment. And he didn't know whose car it was. He was very embarrassed that I walked in and claimed the car. And next day, the headline in the newspaper said, biting the hand that freed him. It was a story. I got razzed a lot by everybody. You're going to represent him this time? Well, I didn't represent him that time, and we lost track. We didn't have any kind of relationship. But one day I'm walking into a gas station near my old office, and who's there but Jimmy Warner, who had driven up with a tractor trailer that he now was employed by a company, and so we exchanged pleasantries, and he was going straight as a truck driver, and he had a career. So that's one of my favorites. That's hard because I've been practicing for over 50 years, so I don't remember much of what it was. And things were different. You affiliate with another lawyer now, so things are a lot easier because you don't have somebody to run to help you out of a spot. My advice, of course, is hit the books, as we did here at Penn.